Good morning, 511 family. How is everybody doing today? I'm excited to be here with you, and we're going to get right into it. We're doing the show a little bit different today, a little bit different than we usually do, but I am proud and honored to have a return guest with us this morning. In fact, he reached out to me, which is just frankly, I'm humbled and honored that you would do that. But we have with us Dr. Kevin McGary, speaker, writer, author, co-founder of Every Black Life Matters, and if it's fair to say, activist who is doing a lot of good work in the community. And I'm looking forward to meeting up with Dr. Kevin in person, or Dr. Kevin McGary, or Dr. Mac, however you want to say it. You guys can say it however you want, at least as far as I know, and then he's going to be on the stage here with me in just a second and correct me and say, no, call me this. But guys, go ahead and bring in Dr. Kevin. What's up, brother?
Brother Mike, how you doing?
Good,
man.
To
see you. Yes. Just Dr. Mac is fine, or Kevin. It's I'm not big on titles, but yeah, I just recently received my PhD from.
Well, I think it's an honor that you got it, and you put in a lot of hard work to get there. So it should be recognized. It's not everybody that can handle the liberal college landscape, come out the other side, still holding on to your values, and finish their degree, and especially such an advanced degree. So no, that's something that we should honor, and that's why I always make a point to say doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, appreciate that, brother. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really honored to be with you again. So enjoyed you and the rest of the team a few weeks ago, and then I think at that time I shared with you I was working on a book and kind of in the middle of the throes of the stages, and over the past couple of months finished it up. It's now released, and I think we're going to be able to delve into that today. So again,
yeah, and we'll
really
make sure and put out a Amazon link or wherever you want everybody to go. We'll make sure that we drop a link for that, Dr. Kevin, so that everybody can get to that. And I've read this book personally. Dr. Kevin didn't think I was going to finish it, but I finished it, and I'm glad I did. And I as I'm reading, I'm thinking, I want to send a copy to this person and this person and this person and this person, because I do think there's a lot of people that need to read it. And what's interesting, Dr. Kevin, is from my perspective, I actually thought of a few of the liberal friends that I have that I'm like, they need to read this, probably more so even than our conservative friends.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. This book actually applies to everybody in the American political landscape. The name of the book is Revealed, and the sort of subtitle is The Archetypes of American Politics. And then another subtitle to that is Overlords, House Negroes, Field Negroes, Which One Are You? Now, that may sound provocative, but essentially what everybody that is in America over 18 actually fits into one of these categories. It's really amazing. It illuminates a lot. It helps you to understand what drives the actions and intentions of the American voter, as far as where we stand politically and et cetera. And actually, it came from a speech to the grassroots in 1963, and it was actually labeled that. It's sort of a speech to the grassroots, 1963, Malcolm X in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And he says, look, and you can say what you want about Malcolm X. Some people really love him. Some people don't, because of his past anti-Semitic remarks that he was making as he was trying to figure himself out. But irrespective of that, you have to acknowledge people in their, especially when they bring about profound truths that we can hold on to. Typically when we have great, profound philosophers and theologians of the past, that were caught up in all kinds of stuff, we don't hold them accountable for that, but we do hold on to their profound intellect and their truth. And Malcolm X should be held in the same way. So when I was reading his letter to the grassroots, because I consider myself a grassroots person, I was astounded. I was floored, because, when you take a look at what he was saying, you overlay it onto today's political landscape, you see exactly, I mean, it's so profoundly, strikingly true. You see exactly what he was talking about. And so let me delve into that if you don't mind, Mike. I can just
Yeah, absolutely.
into that a little bit to give your viewers an understanding. What he said is, look, he says, I've studied what's happened on plantation living when we were going through chattel slavery in America, the antebellum South, and with the interpersonal relationships on the plantation. And he said, I looked at the lives of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Henry Box, and others who were slaves, but ultimately found their way to freedom. They escaped. And he says, what's interesting in reading about what happened during the times of the plantation and all of that and slavery, he says you get these three characterizations that come, it sort of hit you face on. And he says, you had your overlord, your plantation owner, the person who was, overseeing the entire plantation and all of the slaves on that. And then you have your house Negroes. And he said, these are the ones who literally worked for and with the overlord. He says, now you have to understand, these are slaves, but they had special privileges. They were compensated. And he says, so they were compensated to make sure that they keep everybody on the plantation for the overlord. So they were compensated to make sure that they did that, even though they were slaves themselves. They had no desire to leave the plantation. They got the first, most choice hand-me-downs from the plantation owner and his wife. They received, they either slept in the attic or the basement. So they had special sleeping arrangements. He said the best scraps off the table. They got the first dibs on, all of the scraps off the table. They usually sat and ate with the family. So they're closely associated with the plantation owner and his family. And because of that, they actually literally kept an eye on what was happening with those in the field that he characterized as field Negroes. Those are the ones who just wanted to be free. They wanted to be, they wanted to escape. They wanted to be free. But their biggest impediment was the house Negroes, who kept an eye on them, right? So when Frederick Douglass got caught those couple of times, he got caught trying to escape. It wasn't like the plantation owner is some kind of sovereign and he has, he understands who's going to leave when. It was the house Negroes that came and snitched on people like Frederick Douglass who wanted to leave. Said, look, Freddie's going to be leaving tomorrow. He and, so-and-so and so-and-so, they're going to try to make a break tonight. And they were ready for them, right? And so you have to understand, when you overlay that onto Americans' political landscape, you see that the overlords are World Economic Forum, IMF, Soros, Bill Gates. These are the globalists. These are the ones who want for all costs to make sure that they keep the rest of the world economies, the rest of the world societies on a globalist track and on a particular plantation that they've sort of architected. And then and then you look at the sort of house Negroes that would fit, that are doing the bidding for the globalists. And those would be any and all Marxists. Those would be any and all leftist progressives. Those would be any and all people that are trying to make sure that, we don't have free thinking, that people don't really escape that sort of leftist progressive Marxist mindset. And this is why they guilt and shame us to such an nth degree, and why it's become so vitriolic over the past decade or so. It is because they have to keep us with that sort of anti-freedom mindset, keep us tethered to sort of a globalist idea, so we could be ushered into this next utopia, as they would describe it. The field Negroes would be like you and me, Mike. We just want to be free. It's just us and God. I don't want your structures. I don't want excessive taxation. I don't want any other policies that prevent me from being able to speak freely. I don't want you to tell me whether I can pray outside clinics. I don't want you to tell me that there's more than 2 biological species that God designed. I just want to be free. Can I just think for myself? Can I just observe? Can I just make my own assessments and proclamations as to what's real and what's not? And so that's you and I. So the whole idea is that this is, even though we're using the term Negro as far as house Negro and field Negro, it has nothing to do with skin color, ethnicity, or anything else. It's a pathology that we're trying to identify within this book. And so I'm glad you read it all, and I appreciate your input on it that you've given me personally so far. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I love how you got into at least many of the different aspects of society, media, the government institutions, the including academia, which you dove deep into that one, and I want to talk about that in a second. But and the church, which is crazy to see, and I want to talk about that first, actually, because to you and I as Christian brothers, that is and God ordained it to be so. That is holy and sacred, and for that to be subverted by these Marxist leftist ideologies. And I love also the background, which I kind of knew a little bit, but it gave me a lot more insight into Karl Marx specifically as well, and the derelict that he was, which I'd heard that over the years and over time, and it's not surprising in any way whatsoever that he was. However, just to learn all that, but that the church is adopting these ideologies into their church, and it seems like the book is saying, and because I have no personal experiences other than maybe a visit here and there throughout my life in the Black church more so than any other, and we do see similarities in like United Methodist as a denomination and others, and I've never been to a United Methodist church either, but I speak from somewhat of an outside perspective when I'm looking in on that, but I think it's wild. And you talked about Megan Basham and her book. I forget what the title is. It is sitting on my couch right now. I was telling my wife this morning. Yes, there you go. Shepherds for Sale. And if we can drop a link to that, guys, too, so that since we mentioned it, that Shepherds for Sale talks about the pastors. And I was at a Clear Truth conference in Vegas with the guys, and Megan was there and she spoke, and so we got picked up a copy of her book and got it signed and everything. My wife did that. So anyway, let's kind of dive into that and how you specifically dedicated at least a whole chapter, more or less, onto that. So go ahead and share your perspective.
Yeah, let's get into that. So the of all of the institutions of society, the church should be united. I mean, we have one God, one Lord, one Spirit, but we are the most divided, probably, or at least as divided as every other institution in society. And it's like, well, how did we arrive here? We're brothers. We're supposed to be, united as one. We're supposed to all be the bride of Christ. How do we have such crazy divisions within our midst? And a lot of it boils down to the pathology that takes it takes precedence over faith foundation. So in the beginning of the book, I describe how those that are under the pathology of the House Negro, how what that means is that you literally subvert your morals, because again, the House Negroes are slaves, but they were snitching on fellow slaves to the ones that were enslaving them. It is astoundingly irrational.
Yeah.
But under a pathology that you're being compensated, you can sort of rationalize it within yourself. Like, well, I mean, the overlord, my plantation master is paying me to by helping me to be closely associated with the family. He's treating me like one of his kids, whatever. And so you can kind of justify it as a House Negro to do that. So the problem, though, is but you subvert your faith, your morals, your principles, your logic, your rationality, and you go all in for the overlord. So with that pathology in mind, you take a look at the church today, and you see that there's so much division because we've allowed, as Jude describes, and as Revelations in the church of Laodicea, Revelations 3:15, and other places where we're seeing that we're in that sort of last season, we've allowed certain other ideologies to creep in into the purity of the gospel message and really taint the overall, significance of what we're supposed to believe and understand about the gospel of the gospel of truth. And so therefore, we have these pressure points, and we have this sort of tension that's created within the body of Christ. A lot of it actually comes from, it's rooted in Marxism. So Karl Marx was a horribly wretched, reprobate, derelict, demoniac. And I say that with all due respect. I mean, this guy was he's the worst of the worst. His
all
entire
due
life
respect, which is none.
Which is none. Yeah, he was the worst of the worst. And if you read his life story, you just see that this guy was a demon in the flesh. I mean, it's just no other way to put it.
That, I was reading the description that you put in your book about him, I was like, there's a very high likelihood that he was demon possessed.
Yeah. Very, very high. Yeah, very, very high. And so all of his ideologies are seductive and compelling, just like, when you hear Lucifer, when you hear Satan, and you listen to the culture, this demonic culture, there's some real seduction and some compelling reasons that perhaps, as an individual, you would want to participate. So Marx's ideologies are no different. And the church at some level has actually accepted it. What I articulate in the book is that there were certain, ideologies that were brought in via Marxism, which the South American Marxism by way of liberation theology, and then Black liberation theology. James Cone, who was the father of Black liberation theology, his own theology, which were enveloped and sort of enshrined in Marxism. But given,
can you explain those real quick for the people that don't know what those are?
Liberation theology has more to do with collective gospel. We're sort of taking the socialism's main aspects of socialism and saying, look, we need to have wealth distribution because we all collectively get salvation by laying down our lives for one another in a very open way, which is wealth redistribution, more communistic, even taking others' properties and making sure that you kind of have everybody living at the same level of sustenance. The Black liberation theology was much more aggressive in the sense that it says, we do have collective salvation, but it's through the collective understanding that oppression of the Blacks is what drives your ability to ultimately be saved. So he took the purity of the gospel message of Jesus Christ and the sufficiency of the cross and basically convoluted it with this sort of Black representation of Black acknowledgement of oppression. And it's the oppressed that shall inherit everything that God wanted. He basically asserts that God, Jesus came, but he died for the oppressed, not for all men, but for the oppressed specifically, and the oppressed being Black men. James Cone's theology is not only completely antithetical and inaccurate, but it doesn't apply across the spectrum for Blacks. So therefore, it's narrowly defined. It mostly applies to Black Americans and their plight, under slavery, and then trying to gain access with civil rights and all of that. So it really is an insufficient gospel, but basically they pose it and really hit the point that you must be a social activist in order to achieve salvation. You achieve salvation by being a social activist for the oppressed, which primarily are the Blacks.
Well, so it's crazy to think that the Black population, knowing their history in America and where they came from, literally out of slavery, and with the people like Frederick Douglass, which I love how much you included him in the conversation about Frederick Douglass, that they would buy into this. And when you talk about Margaret Sanger and the Planned Parenthood, and I found it crazy because this was new information to me, that she would literally pay the pastors to speak on things. And knowing what we both know about the additional level of judgment or scrutiny, which clearly is stated in the Bible that pastors are under. Wow.
Let me go into that. That's thank you for that, because that's the other part of this. So a lot of people say, well, Sanger was just a hater, right? She just hated blacks. Yes, she did, but she had a particular ideology that drove her to that point. What was the ideology? The ideology was eugenics. Okay, so she was part of the Eugenics Society and all of that. Where did eugenics come from? Well, you have to go back. You have to go back to Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, who just so happens to have had a protege called Karl Marx. So this is all connected, right? So Darwin asserted, so for those of us, and I don't want to go into all Darwin's history, I wrote a lot about Darwin in my past books, but here's fundamentally what he did. Prior to Darwin's assertion that blacks are literally subhuman, and that they're just one level, they're at the parasite level, right? They're still subhuman, and therefore there is no equality for blacks. How are you going to treat blacks equal when they're subhuman? They're still trying to climb the evolutionary scale. He says they're tantamount to apes, gorillas, and savages. This is Darwin in his second book, The Descent of Man. So when you have that as a backdrop, then you can see how the eugenicists then became a real thing. Because Darwin and his first cousin, Francis Galton, decided that, well, since blacks are still subhuman, and really all other ethnicities are, quite inferior when it comes to us white supremacists. Now, if you want to talk about white supremacy, it was Darwin who inculcated that, literally, by saying that blacks are subhuman and therefore unequal, and actually that whites were the first to fully evolve. And therefore, every other ethnicity after that has some level or degradation from the original order. This is Darwin, his philosophy. This is his work. Okay, so when you see that, then you say, okay, white supremacy, racism, all of it comes together. And then he and his first cousin Francis Galton decided, look, what we're going to do is to make sure that we keep the trajectory of our white supremacy. So therefore, we really need to come up with a way to make sure that we get rid of, inferior races. So this is where eugenics started. So they said, look, well, why don't we make up a term for it? I get it. Eugenics. So literally the father of eugenics was Francis Galton and Charles Darwin. And eugenics literally means well-born in Greek. Okay. So those that are not well-born, they could summarily exterminate. So when you look at, Hitler and all that he did to the Jews and Poles and all of those, he had the eugenics mindset. He actually told his German, friends that, look, we can do this because Darwin, it's all in Darwin's work. We have to get rid of the inferior class amongst us because we want to be pure Aryans. This is the mindset, right? So you look at Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Lenin, all of them really embraced Darwin's work and embraced eugenics. When eugenics came to America, then it's embraced by Margaret Sanger. And Margaret Sanger says, look, we got to get rid of the bad stock. The blacks, they're inferior. They're going to just produce more poverty, blah, blah, blah. This is all her mindset. And so she says, look, we got to get rid of them. So she, first of all, tried to sterilize a lot of the poor black women in different states. And you've heard about the Black Sterilization Project. Under the auspices of vaccines, these women had no idea they were being sterilized, but this is how evil these people were, right? And then she started these clinics, and she realized that she wasn't getting enough blacks in the clinics for her abortuaries, right? And so she says, look, we really need to get the black pastors because they still hold the key to their communities. They're the leaders in their community. What we need to do is just pay them $100 a sermon to preach the merit of abortion. So these people were paid back then, and they're paid now. The reason why you have so many people, pastors, that did not all universally applaud the Roe v. Wade rollback to the states is because so many of them are on the payroll. Yeah, some of them are post-abortive, but they're still being paid by either Planned Parenthood, by the government in some way, shape, or form.
And Megan Basham talks a lot about that in her book and gets into that,
yes,
right?
She does. Yes, she does. Yes, she brings in these pastors and ministers and leaders within the faith communities that are derelict and reprobate, fully walking outside of the scope of the biblical truth that they should be in. And a lot of it comes out of these pathologies that we've adopted, that we've learned to enshrine within ourselves. And as long as we're compensated, like we have seen historically and like we see today, we're going to have these divisions. We need pastors that are sincere and cannot be bought, sold, or bargained with when it comes to the gospel. The gospel
100%.
is the gospel. The cross is the cross, and it has to be 100% sufficient in all ways, shapes, and forms. But yet we see over this past weekend, we see this black church in Atlanta that brings in this sort of lady that has, in my opinion, she has a Jezebel spirit. She's fully adopting the pathology of the House Negro and for the globalist overlords, because she does not sharpen enough herself to have, real policies or ideas or, so she's a puppet. And yet we see her being brought into the pulpit and actually preaching in this church in Atlanta. So we see, clearly that there's something wrong here. Now, we have to be reminded, Galatians 1:8 and 1:9, our brother Paul, Apostle Paul, told us, he says, look, even if an angel from heaven gives you one iota of different gospel than what we preach, they're cursed. And he says, he was so emphatic about it. Literally, it's the only scriptures I found that literally repeat in the entire Bible, one verse after the other. And in Galatians 1:9, he says, and I say again, if anyone comes and gives you any other gospel than what we have preached, they're cursed to hell. So we have, black liberation theology, we have liberation theology, we have these other liberal ideologies that are running rampant in the body of Christ. And the reason why we have such divisions is we have people like you and I, Mike, that believe in the sufficiency and the truth of the gospel, the sufficiency of the cross and the truth of the gospel. And we have others that say, well, that was a couple thousand years ago. We can fiddle around the edges. We can add a little bit here. We can put a little social justice in there, a little CRT, a little DEI, a little culture here, a little, let's get the skinny jeans, the fog machines, and let's go for it. Right? You're trying to syncretize the culture with the purity of the gospel. It doesn't work. And you're literally cursing yourself and everybody else in your assembly that would imbibe the foolishness of basically demonic foolery is what we're saying.
No, the one that I was most disappointed with, because I used to really like him previously. And actually there were several that you mentioned, and I was like, it's so sad how they've all been deceived, right? But one of the ones that really stood out to me was T.D. Jakes, and he was one that was doing a great job, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if he changed or if he just revealed himself, but
I think the compromise came in. He was too tightly wound with culture, and when you get people need to understand. All right, so the MO of our foe, the modus operandi of our foes. It's been fully disclosed to us. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy us. Okay, so now we look at culture. Culture is fully inculcated with the demonic, with demonism, right? Culture is there to steal, kill, and destroy us individually and collectively. Okay, so when you start as a man of God or woman of God, tying yourself to culture, you're literally tying yourself to destruction. I mean, there's no, there's no upside to that. Okay, so T.D. Jakes began to tie himself to Diddy and others within culture, trying to be hip, cool, and whatever. And then he tied himself to our government by way of the COVID, stuff, right? I know we can't mention it here, but by way of what was happening a few years ago with pandemics and all of that, demanding that everybody in this church, show their verification by the, everybody has to make sure that they have, all of the whatever. And so when he's paid like that, by social credibility, by being part of this sort of elite cultural status within hip hop and whatever, and then he's paid by our government, then you're compromised, you're captured, you're gone.
Yeah,
you can't stand for that and stand for the gospel at the same time. They're completely, they don't work. They're mutually exclusive. They don't work. So I think that was part of his problem. Yeah.
So one of there were so many good things in this book. It's like hard. Like I want to talk about as much of it as we can here. Yeah. But the Project Paperclip, which I was reading about, and I wanted you to explain that to our audience. But and I asked you the question before we started here. Do you think it was intentional? And I reading between the lines, it looks like it was an unintentional adverse side effect of something that I think that they were trying to do to further our country, but massively backfired and is like now put us on a path to near destruction.
Yeah, yeah. So I would encourage everybody to do their, Project Paperclip is fully, along with, the Negro Project, Margaret Sanger, and what else do I have in there? You know,
Munt Smith and
Bernays and the Smith Month Act and all of those
yeah.
things are in the book, and it's all the dots are connected, so you can begin to read up on this stuff. I would encourage you to do your own research too. Project Paperclip is a big deal. The reason why it's a big deal is we're looking at our academia, our institutions of academia today. They used to be institutions of excellence, and now they're not.
Yes.
They're institutions of propaganda and brainwashing
Indoctrination,
of our
yeah.
children and grandchildren, full indoctrination. So then, so how did we get there, right? What happened? How did these great colleges, Yale, Harvard, and incredible Christian college, how did they get so compromised and then captured by sort of this globalist mindset?
Is
The
Yale
idea-
and Harvard a Christian college, by the way?
Oh yeah. They started. as Christian
You would
colleges.
never know
Absolutely.
that. I knew they were private colleges, but I didn't know they were Christian colleges.
They
Like
started as
USC,
Christian colleges.
you would never know was a Christian college, right?
Yeah. Most of our colleges that started in the 1900s, early 1900s, 18, even 1700s, they're Christian. They're founded on Christian principles. They were Christian colleges. So here's what happened. Project Paperclip. World War II, right? You had a lot of people and that were part of the Hitler, and he was really abusing a lot of his own people. And we were on the fast track to try to figure out a way that we can come up and be a superpower so we could protect ourselves, show peace through strength worldwide. And so we were starting to develop our atomic programs, our nuclear bombs and all of that, atomic bombs, earlier hydrogen bombs, whatever you want to call them. And but we didn't have enough expertise here in America to do that. So when we heard of a lot of Hitler's physicists that were in his programs in Germany, they really wanted out. But these were, world-class, world-leading, renowned intellectuals about physics and nuclear physics specifically. So we brought them out and gave them asylum, basically, and made them American citizens. 1,600 professors, renowned, smart intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that they were fully communists. They really did buy into the Marxist communist, idea.
Nazism,
full.
Yeah.
And so when we brought them in and gave them, our top roles in our, universities, institutions of learning, higher institutions of learning, that was great. We got a lot of knowledge from them. We fully developed our nuclear programs with their insight and intellect and skill. But then they became these renowned professors, academics within our universities. And they began to then foster this idea of how great communism is, how great Marxism is, globalism, to where now we arrive to this point. It's not a viral moment that 99% of all of our university professors are crazy leftist progressive Marxists. It happened because we can point to now the root cause of how that happened. 1,600 really highly esteemed intellectuals.
If you think about it, Dr. Kevin, that's really not that many, because how many professors are on one college campus?
Yes, you're right. It's not that many, but when you consider now multiple generations, you consider about 80 years, 90 years, I guess, almost 100 years. It's taken a long time for us to arrive here. But so it's like 1,600 couldn't happen overnight. You won't have a profound impact. But if you take and then bring in generations and kind of teach them this idea of a better way, which is more communistic in nature, we would arrive at about 100 years later. And Yuri Bezmenov, who was an ex-KGB agent, he escaped and gained asylum here in the United States. He says, "Look, this is all practiced and scripted how we would ultimately consume America. We knew it wouldn't be overnight; it'd take about 100 years, but upon generations, we can build this into academia, into the general mindset and frame that people operate from, and ultimately they would come around to being communists." And so this is very strategic. It's purposeful. It's practiced by way of these 1,600 professors. They understood it was going to be a long haul because we had faith, we had family, we had other institutions that were not allowing us to go with this crazy communistic mindset. We wanted to be free. And but over time, they've worn us down. They've fully indoctrinated all of our university experience. And so now you take your kids who you just want them to be excellent people. You want them to pursue excellence in every way. And they're coming out a year later. They've got tattoos and they've got, all of these, piercings and they've got these crazy ideas about who God is or who he's not. And they're completely turned out when they come home. And the reason is because we release them to a level of demonism we can't even begin to understand. And then the academic experience with their professors, who they highly esteem within the classroom, it teaches them, it fully indoctrinates them into this globalist mindset.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were telling me about a conversation they had with somebody else who their kids had graduated from college, and they asked this other person they were speaking to, how much did it cost you to have your kids taught to hate you? And that's, my family, and that's one of the reasons, and I prayed about this a lot back then, 20 years ago, when I was in my early 20s, about going to college. That's one of the reasons I didn't go to college. And, like Charlie wrote a whole book about it, right?
This is why I applaud people like Charlie in the book, even. I call so in the book, I know and I want to make sure we don't run out of time, but in the book, I name names. I call them out because
many names.
One of the things is to come from a place of, look, I just want to disclose what's happening, but we have too many books that are too high level, and it's hard for people to say, well, who would that fit? Who would that be? Where does that fit? I name names because you have to understand those that are operating in the pathology today. These people can change. They can change and say, look, I want to be fully free. I want to operate as in the pathology as a field Negro. But those that are overlords and House Negroes today, they're called out. And in every institution. Mm-hmm. So media, I call out The View, I call out Oprah Winfrey, I call out Bill Maher, Ben Stiller, all these people, right? I call out the overlords, Soros and IMF and WEF and BlackRock and all these institutions. As far as field Negroes, those they're fully, invested in freedom, right? The heroes that are standing up against the tide. I call them out too. That would be Charlie Kirk, Glenn Beck, and other folks that everybody would. So it's important that we begin to see the archetypes in operation, so we could say, "Oh, yeah, I understand."
So you can identify them.
Identify them,
yeah. So we, I thought that was great how you called them out specifically. Also, but I know another one of the things that you and I both wanted to touch on during this time together. And by the way, I got to throw this in because this popped in my mind. When I see you, Kevin, I want to get a copy of your book, hard copy, signed, and I'll pay you for it. But I definitely want that. And guys, this is an easy read. It's not a difficult read. It's not a super. My wife's reading this 700-page book, and I was like, well, it's not that long. But you go through all of it. But let's talk about the Smith-Mundt Act and how that changed the face of media, and really why it kind of opened the doors for the likes of 511 Media and Turning Point and others to really bring the truth, because essentially what this act did was it eliminated the requirement for these mass mainstream media organizations to bring you the truth.
Yes. So the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 was an act that really allowed U.S. organizations and media to produce without any real consequences, to produce propaganda elsewhere around the world. So we could, do these color revolutions under the auspices of, op-eds and propaganda and begin to sort of deceive people in other foreign lands without any recourse, right? So these media organizations were entitled to do that to a certain level around the world. When Obama comes in office, he says, we really need the Smith-Mundt Act for the United States. So for the first time in U.S. history, We have a president that does an executive order and says, look, we're going to sort of orchestrate and re-architect the focus and the tempo and the template for the Smith-Mundt Act, and we're going to actually apply it to the United States. We're going to absolve media from having to tell the truth. So the reason why we see, complete brainwashing, lies, distortions when it came to what everybody dealt with a couple years ago with the pandemic, call it what you want, pandemic, whatever. The media knew that these things weren't tested. They knew that people were having, life challenges, and a lot of deaths that were occurring as a result of some of the things that were, but they distorted the truth and says, look, the reason why people are dying is because, you guys are not, vaccinated. And so you guys, those that didn't get, are the ones that are the problem. When people see that there's millions upon millions coming over our border, when the media sees that, they say, no, border security. What are you talking about? When they saw in 2020, BLM and Antifa tearing up the streets, $2 billion of damages, multiple law enforcement officers of 2021 literally losing their lives. And they say, look, no, this is all peaceful. There's no problem. This is all peaceful. Everything's fine. While literally in the background, things are burning up. You begin to understand that they can do this with good conscience because they're a media organization with no consequence. They're actually paid to lie, to deceive, to distort, to cancel, to censor, to omit certain very important stories. When we see President Trump gets literally shot at, almost assassinated, and we see his ear and everything else, and they say, "Oh, he wasn't even. That was all scripted. That's fake." Then we can understand. Oh, it's the Smith-Mundt Act. It's Obama's, baby in operation, and it doesn't really solve the problem for us, but it helps us to understand and at least put some rational logic behind, because if you don't understand it, this will drive you crazy. It's like, what? How are they not seeing what I'm seeing? How is this so? It will drive you nuts. But when you understand that this is all sort of concocted, they've been insulated from any consequence for lying, blatantly lying to us, then you understand. Oh, okay.
Well, and I think there's a couple, there actually multiple, but there's a couple things I want to say. First of all, we see a lot of people that we're associated with, Dr. Kevin, that say, well, Fox News is telling us the truth. No. I call them out all the time. And I want to specifically make a point to call them out because I have family members that are like, oh, I watch Fox News. Okay, watch it, whatever. But they're not telling you the truth either. They're just pretending to be a little bit different slant. But you look at, okay, who owns a large percentage of Fox News? BlackRock, same organization that owns CNN, MSNBC, and all the others. So you don't think that they're disseminating the same message just from a different angle, so that you'll buy into it?
Exactly right. That's why I call out Fox News. I said they're
and you do
House Negroes. They're operating at the behest of the globalists, right? Yeah. So I call out Fox News. I call out Joy Reid. So what we have to understand is if we were to just simply dismiss these people as lunatics, they're crazy. But the reality is Joy Reid and Bill Maher and all these and several of these other talking heads are actually, they're intellectual. They're not dumb people, but you have to understand they're being paid.
Yeah.
So Joy Reid is being paid to spew her hate towards free thinking people. She has to keep us on the plantation, so she has to guilt us and shame us and call us all of these disparaging names. You white, whatever.
Let's follow that chain. How are they being paid? Because, and I know the answer, and I want you to comment on this too, Dr. Kevin. But so let's take so they're being paid by let's take Fox News as a great example. They're being paid by Fox. Well, who owns Fox? BlackRock. Well, where is BlackRock getting their money? From many liberal organizations like CalPERS and the New York State Teachers Association and others. So, and who are literally telling them this has been proven. It's not even even controversial at this point. It's been proven that these very liberal, dare I say, socialistic organizations are saying, "Hey, if you want our money, we want you to force these corporations that you own as part of your what is it, mutual fund or whatever, to force them to push this message down." Right?
Yeah, it's actually even more it's even more diabolical than that. So BlackRock and State Street are at a global level, right?
Yes.
So they get funded directly from the IMS, International Monetary Fund. They probably, I don't know if the UN puts any dollars there, but so IMF and a lot of these, globalist organizations help fund these global banks. They then tell our banks that, look, if you have DEI standards or CRT standards, critical race theory, diversity, equity, inclusion, type standards within how you lend money, then we'll give you a certain amount of social credit, and then you'll actually be able to tap into more financial of your lines. So BlackRock and State Street actually do a lot of the globalist lending at the global level to banks throughout the world. And they put these standards on them that they can tap into higher levels of financial, leverage if they have these things that are, that are sort of cemented as part of their social policy within their workplace. So it's actually so diabolical to unwind it and to see how crazy it is. But here's the point. It's leading us in one direction. All of these organizations and institutions, what this book does, and the reason why it's called Revealed, is it's helping you to really see, like, what is going on here? What are the pathologies? What are they driving to? When you peel the onion back, every reader will get, you're going to be faced with a binary choice when you come to the end. And I hope you saw that, Mike. Mm-hmm. The binary choice is, if you say, look, I don't care, come what may, I'm a freed man, and I want to fully embrace the freedoms, my innate freedoms that God gave me. And I don't care. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about Marxism. I'm not going to pursue any of that. That is not me. I don't want any structures. It's me and God, and I just want to be free. Then you are of the Field Negro pathology and mindset. All right. If you say, look, the world is already going in this direction anyway. Globalism is kind of our reality. It doesn't really matter. Marxism is really not that bad. Social justice, we can level the playing field with DEI. This is all part, it's all Marxist theology, I understand. And Marx probably wasn't a good guy, but, some of his ideas were not bad. We should probably embrace globalism. Then you are of, and it's just you are of the House Negro mindset. That's just where you land. Because you don't mind that people are in their individual rights that are God-given are subjected and subordinated to a larger social order. So if you don't, because Marxism is authoritarian, totalitarian, depending on to what level. But obviously, communism is a totalitarian state. At the socialism level, it's authoritarian at the very least. So if you don't mind that, then you are of the House Negro mindset. Now, if you're a legislator and you operate at the table with Soros and Bezos and Gates and these overlords globally, you go to the Davos meetings, you have a lot of, maybe have billions and multiple billions, then you are an overlord, and that's just where you are. So, I mean, everybody fits into one of these three categories. By the way, the only, globalist billionaire that I said is not an overlord, and I don't even know if he's probably a globalist, but he's not an overlord, is Elon Musk. I said he operates more like the Field Negro. He has a pathology of it. He says, look, I just want people to be free. I want me to be free. I want to be able to freely, create my innovations around the world and do what I do. Now, clearly, he's a globalist because he's a billionaire and he's got global ambitions, right? But he is not of the globalist order in the sense that I want to sit at the table while we totalitarians rule the rest of the world. He's not that kind of a globalist, but he has, he's a globalist in the sense that he's a tech and inventor and innovator and that kind of stuff.
So what about Donald Trump? Another billionaire,
Donald
right?
Trump is the quintessential field Negro. So, he just wants to be free. He wants everybody else to be free. He believes in sovereignty, which, by the way, every country in the world believes that they should have sovereign rule over their territories. This is basic. So he believes in walls and barriers to prevent people who have bad intentions coming in and harming us free people in our free country. But his whole thing, his motivation is freedom, not just for himself and his family, but for everybody. Look, you should be free to innovate and do what you want to do, and government should get out of the way. And so he's definitely with us as operating under the Field Negro pathology.
So one of the questions you asked in, I believe it was the second to last chapter of the book. It was the final section in that chapter, I believe, was, are we headed for assured destruction? Are we headed off a cliff that we can't come back from? And talk about your answer to that question. I love your answer and how you put that in the book.
Yeah, I don't think it's too late. I do think that we would have assured destruction depending on what happens in the next 2 weeks, right? If you put the sort of quintessential globalist figurehead puppet there, I don't really have high hopes that we'd be able to come back from the carnage that she will immediately implement. A lot of people weren't even aware that we're already on the precipice. This election is much more than about his personality, her personality, his morals, her morals. Look, these are flawed individuals, both, and we have flawed parties. So let's not go there. I mean, everybody's got some junk, right? So the reality is this is about, are we going to remain a free country for just a while longer? You and I are brothers in the Lord. We understand what Revelation says. So we're in the last of the last stages. You read the tea leaves, you see where we are. I think that she accelerates that, and she takes us beyond our ability to recoup. And I only say that because look at what's happened, and then look at what she said she will do. Central bank digital currency via Biden's executive order 14067 two years ago, which he said, look, we want to be prepared for central bank digital currency here in America. And he told all the banks, you need to be ready with central bank digital currency and have it fully tested as of December of last year. As of December of last year, Wells, Chase, Citibank, all the major banks in the United States says, look, we tested central bank digital currency, we're ready. Okay. That's the ability for the government then to control via digital, whether you can buy or sell. This is in Revelations as well, right? So we're at the cusp, right? You see that. Then you have the BRICS nations. BRICS nations just met yesterday. This is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now they've got 37 additional nations I was just reading about before I came on this interview this morning. So the BRICS nations, the BRICS currencies are competing with our petrodollars. They're trying to undermine the U.S. currency. And they will ultimately if we have the wrong figurehead in our government, which could be this, in the next 2 weeks will be decided. Then you have, so you got the social credit scoring with digital currency, you've got BRICS, and then you have, the desire to change the entire scope and focus of the Supreme Court, taking it from 9 to 12 to 15 to 17 people, permanently enshrining a leftist bent within the Supreme Court. Then you have this person saying, look, we're going to make sure that across all states, that you'll be able to delete your children. I'm trying to be nice because I know we're in YouTube. Up to the day of delivery, and even in some states like California and some other states, even after delivery, you can make that decision. I don't know. I don't think I want children now. You could go ahead, chop it up, and sell the body parts. I don't want to be crass here or crude, but this is what's happening, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So you have that. So when all of those things are overlaid, we would be too far gone. And the other thing is, she says she's going to let every immigrant who has come in, close to 20 million by some counts, over the past several years, to be voters. Okay, so you permanently enshrine a ruling class. Our votes won't count; they'll be completely nullified by These folks that most are illiterate in their own language. They have on average, they have a third grade education. They're illiterate in their own language. They have no idea what a U.S. Constitution is or anything about America. And they would be basically ruling via votes in perpetuity. So all that said, this is, can we come back? Yes, but we need a somebody that has the Field Negro pathology. That would be a Trump who can then push back only for a period of time. We know we're at the end of the end, but
yeah,
do we want to try to preserve America and contend, like our Lord tells us, contend and occupy until he comes? Or do we just give up and say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to vote. I'm going to let whatever happens. So depending on what happens in the next 2 weeks will tell us a lot.
Yeah. And, Kevin, the way I keep putting it and the question I keep asking is we have a choice right now to make. And are you going to be standing at that point so many days, months, years from now, looking back on this moment in the next 2 weeks? Are you going to ask yourself, where was I when I had the chance to save our republic? Or where was I when we did save our republic?
That's it. And my thing, especially the pastors, I had some friends that were telling me that they participated in an event in Pennsylvania a couple of weeks ago. And this one guy said, look, I was the only dissenter in the room. All the pastors there told all the parishioners there, 300-400 people, don't vote. Doesn't matter. Don't vote. Excuse me. And he was the only one that says, no, you must vote. You must vote for Trump because this is what God would have us do. But here's the point. We have a lot of people within the body of Christ, and I'm sure a lot of people will see this podcast, Mike, a lot of your followers that are still unconvinced about how they should vote or whether it's important. God will hold you accountable. Now you see what's at stake. Mike and I have just gone through some of the things that are at stake and some of the things that have been at work. And I'm hoping that you will be convicted enough that you will pick up that ballot and go ahead and vote because you now know enough. You can't say, okay, well, God, I was just ignorant. I didn't know. Now you know. So you're going to be held accountable. Sorry,
that's right.
But that's the way it is.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So that's the question. That's where we're at. You got 2 weeks. What are you going to do to save our republic? Yeah. Have a great day, guys. See you next time. God bless.